Hi everyone, my apologies in advance. It is past 2 a.m. here and I do not have time to script this, so I'm going to be very rambly. This is another pixel art feedback session with some suggested edits, and in particular this game designer is working with the pixel artist that did what you see on the screen here, and their goal is to match something very similar to these sprites here from classic JRPG games with the same sort of perspective and rendering style. And the character that they're trying to recreate as a sprite is this character design here. And this was, if I understand correctly, the most recent version after some initial feedback of the sprite that they've created. And so we're going to do our best to help bring them the rest of the way to capture this character and this style as well as possible. And so that's the gist of it. Let me see what other image we have. I have that twice for no reason. Okay. All right, so there is another image that I did want to show everyone. This is where the image was the first time I started giving some feedback on it. Let me get these back up. And one thing you'll notice here, I'm sorry, I only have some images that were enlarged, and because they were shared over Facebook, Facebook chewed them up and turned them into highly compressed JPEGs. Wow, I can't even zoom in, really? That's fine. Oh, there we go. So one of the problems that they were having is that the designer felt like the character was looking upward, and they didn't know why. And I suggested it was the angle of the cheek here starts fairly high up, and it creates the illusion that the chin is way over here under the eye to the right, to the left, the character's right eye. And of course your chin isn't out like that unless you're looking up, or obviously turned very much to the side. So I suggested they lower the cheek and make sure it looks like the chin is directly under the face. And let's see, you can see here, if I can zoom in, it looks like the chin is here, which is, it seems like only a pixel here, but it's actually 1 pixel at such a low resolution is a big difference. And same thing here, it's pretty much center. The pointiest part of the head is close to centered under the eye, even though it's 3/4 view. So in the later version it's closer, but let me get back to that again 1 second. Like I said, I'm going to be very disorganized and rambly here, my apologies, but I just wanted to cover this. This will lead to an important point, I promise. All right, so going back to this again. All right, so if you look here, there's clean row of pixels under the face. You see they never, in chibi JRPG style sprites, they never try to render mouths or noses. This, of course, is a stylistic thing that probably evolved from a resolution issue, where in the original games on the 8-bit Nintendo and things like that, they didn't have the resolution to even try to add noses and mouths to the heads at the resolution they would be with only 3 colors to use for the head in general. So, but it became a very specific sort of stylization, and it's very dangerous to go away from that style, to sort of break what became the rules, even though we have higher resolutions to work with now. And you'll see in this first iteration here, we have, oops, we have what looks like an attempt to get the character's mouth in there. Let me see if we, yep. So you can see they have a nice little smile, a little grin. And I think this was the pixel artist's attempt to get that smile in there. You can see there's also a point that is probably trying to get the nose in there. And those are two features that, you know, the artist was trying to get this likeness, but they don't belong in this this entire style, this entire genre of sort of sprite work. And so it is very, very easy. It's one of those tricky things. Like, it works if you zoom out. It does sort of capture the illusion of a nose and a mouth there, but it breaks the style that they are going for. And because it does, and because of what people expect, even people that are not artists but have seen and played JRPG games, it's very easy for that stuff to look just like slightly messy pixel art. For example, you've got this slightly darker skin tone, which is representing seemingly the mouth, but it's touching the outline, the chin, the outline of the underside of the head. And then you've got the same color to the left of it, and then a light skin color, and then you've got the mouth. And then, because you're dealing with so few pixels, and because usually mouths aren't there, this looks like a quickly, hastily done shadow line to try to create a shadow before we go to the underside of the head. And it just looks like the artist missed 2 pixels, and the nose just sort of looks like a stray pixel. So that's something really specific. Usually, at this resolution with this number of colors, usually it is a good idea to just do what you can to try to get as close to a likeness as you can of the character sort of design sheet that you've been given. But in the case of JRPGs, where it's still a relatively low resolution, you don't want to break the conventions that everyone's used to that really sort of mark that art style, because things will just look like mistakes very quickly, or just things, even if people don't understand what the difference is, it won't feel right to them, it won't feel authentic. So that's an interesting thing that's pretty darn specific to JRPG style, like isometric pixel art sprites of this sort. But anyway, hopefully that made sense. So the latest version that they arrived at after some feedback was this one here, which certainly captures the general style decently. The one thing that I would say, I already removed some extra colors that were almost exact duplicates to the colors near it. So there were like 2 other reds that were almost exactly that bright red. There was another red that was... So this is a problem I see a lot in modern, especially beginner pixel artists, or pixel artists that never actually worked on a game that was going to run an actual hardware that required pixel art, where it wasn't just a style. So if you worked on consoles in the day, or computers back in the 16-bit era, then you understood specific hardware technical limitations, and that's what sort of created what became known as pixel art. But nowadays people are using hardware and software that does not have those limitations, and they're trying to emulate the style of pixel art, but their lack of understanding and the fact that these tools don't put those constraints on them is actually one of the things that can make it difficult for them to match more legitimate looking pixel art style. And one of those things, which is almost across the board in classic consoles going back, almost everything in the 16-bit era, in general, when you see a character sprite, it's going to be 15 colors plus the clear or background color. So that's something that can really help pixel artists that are trying to make more authentic looking pixel art. So often they just waste so many color indexes or indices with colors that are incredibly similar to one another. You can look here, I'll zoom way in. Here you have a dark, slightly grayish blue, and right near it is another blue that's, to the human eye when you zoom out, it's going to be really hard to tell that those are two different colors there. So that's very wasteful of a color index, and that's not something a pixel artist would have ever done in the classic 16-bit era, especially because back then the only TV and monitor technology was CRT, which was inherently blurry, which, you know, there would be no way to distinguish those two colors to the human eye when you looked at the sprite at the actual size. So anyway, so now my feedback in general for this particular sprite, let's see if I can get to the right one. All right, so this is my first, so here's where they are. And then here's the changes that I've made, and I'm going to see if I can remember all of them and explain the decision I made with each one. And so the first thing is, you can see here again, there's this darker, or the darkest brown color or skin color was put down here, which makes me feel, again, almost like they were trying to get a mouth in there, but maybe not. Maybe they're just trying to sort of anti-alias a very curved underside of the head. But again, when you do stuff like that, most of the time it's just going to seem like a mistake, or like you're trying to get a mouth in there. It almost looks like the character's wearing brown lipstick and has their mouth a little bit lower than it should be. So that's one of the things, is I just cleaned that up. I made a straight line, no mouth. It's just a straight line representing the bottom perimeter of the head, the jawline, just to clean it up, make it look like it's not a mistake, make it look more in keeping with the traditional style, no nose, no mouth. And then the other thing I did, sorry, I just went to the wrong page again, jumping ahead of myself accidentally, is in almost every JRPG game, once it was 16-bit and they had enough colors to go around, you'll see this almost halo effect. Not in my bald head, that's a whole different halo effect, but you'll see the brightest color reflecting around the perimeter of the hair on the head. I keep going the wrong way. And you'll see, if I go back here, you'll see it exists on this character here, which was one of the closest style guides they were originally using, and you will see it on their first go, which is here. You'll see they tried to get the same effect, but they were sort of more carefully trying to follow the contour and the shape of the hair itself and not the overall head, and cast that traditional Japanese chibi manga style halo, which is much more round and really sort of delineates the change of plane, if the head were a box, between the top of the head and the sides of the head. So that's one of the things I did, is I just got that back in there. And then the other thing that I did was I just worked on getting the hairstyle more just closer to the actual character design. So if you look here in the most recent pixel art by the pixel artist, the hair just sort of fans out and just looks like a much more traditional, typical long hair hairdo that just fans out. It just gets thicker as it goes down, and then just sort of, you know, I don't even know how to describe it, but it doesn't match the more boyish, sort of spiky hairstyle that is in the original character design. So I just worked on that a little bit to make it have the more specific spikes, and then to start taper back in toward the neck, even though it's still coming out as spikes. I also lengthened this bang, although I didn't bring it down as far as it is. I brought it down farther. As you can see, it's way up here near the eyebrows. I brought it down one more pixel, brought this down a bit. I hit highlights on these spikes to emphasize those spikes just as they are emphasized here, catching some light. And then I added this little bit of detail here, this sort of fold that separates the, what do you call that? I'm having a mental block on the words. Like I said, it's past 2 a.m. Is that a tunic? What is that? I can't think of the word, sorry. But anyway, the fabric here, the way it has that fold in it. And then the other thing I did that is fairly subtle is I made the arms 1 pixel longer to give it more room so I could hit that light metal shoulder armor as it is here. You can see here it kind of disappeared and it became the same material as this and almost the same material as the boots. And so I just brought it back to a shiny metal shoulder armor, gave it a little more emphasis. And then, so those are the major changes. The other things were fairly subtle. You'll see, here's the original. For some reason, even though these are just pants, if you look at the character design here, these are just loose-fitting pants. And this blue fabric is obviously going over the pants. But in this pixel art, it looks like the pants are somehow sticking out into the blue fabric, which didn't make any sense. So I just cut that off. You could even do this if you wanted to, but I thought it was not completely necessary, so I just left it like that. But that's something that you could do. And that's the gist of it. That's the most of the changes that I did. But then there's one more step to go. And keep in mind, the other thing that I would do if I were the artist is, well, because I'm old, I actually was doing pixel art on devices that were actually 16-bit that did have those specific hardware limitations. So I got used to simultaneously creating my 15 color palette, which is technically 16, but it's 15 usable colors and then the background color. So I would definitely suggest to all aspiring pixel artists, and if you want your pixel art to look more authentic, work on developing your 15 color palette simultaneous to developing the art and sort of evolve the two as you go. And you'll learn to be more careful with how many colors you're using, and your pixel art will end up looking more authentic and nicer and cleaner, less blurry. It'll help you avoid things like pillow shading and things like that. So this is still using way too many colors, but I don't have the time right now to show you how to color reduce. But and then the other thing, but it would be worth studying those other sprite images that I was given as the references they were shooting for. If you were to study these, you'll see none of them are more than 15 colors plus a background color. So you can do a lot with 15 colors, especially at this range. People are almost always, when they start in pixel art, they're under the false impression that they need a much smoother range of shades from light to dark for every color family, like the red for the hair and the blue for the costume. And you just end up wasting a lot of color indexes. So if you know right from the get-go that you only have 15 to spare, you won't be wasteful with them. And like I said, as a result, your sprite work will look more authentic and cleaner. But anyway, so aside from that, the only other thing I suggest, and it's another thing I've seen a lot more recently, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I joined more pixel art groups like on Facebook, and there are more beginners that I'm being exposed to. But I'm noticing so many artists, so many pixel artists now are only and always doing the pure black outline sort of style of pixel art, which is much more 8-bit than 16-bit. So they're using more colors than a 16-bit. They're using more than 32 colors instead of 16. But at the same time, they're doing the pitch black outline around everything, which is a style that virtually disappeared by the time of later Mega Drive or Genesis games and Super Nintendo games, and was replaced with what is in general a much more visually appealing style, which I did a quick version of here, which is where you're almost never using pure black for the outline. You're just using the darkest version of every color family to outline that color. So you'll see here in the hair that I'm just using the darkest of the reds instead of black to stroke it. And I only left black on the undersides where it would be its most shadowed. And you can see I got rid of the black outline almost everywhere. And in general, that's the idea. Only if something is already quite dark and it's on the side opposite from the light should you still be using black, if you're going to use black at all. Otherwise, you should be using one of the darkest colors of the particular color family that needs the outline there. So you can see here, I just used a dark brown skin color to outline the hand, as I did here as well. Same thing with these gloves or gauntlets. I just used the same darkest tan brown color as the stroke. And you get the idea. Same thing here with the knee armor. So you can see the difference. There's the original with the pitch black stroke, which is a very 8-bit style. And then there's the version with the more modern 16-bit style, which I assume, if you look at, I didn't even look closely, I took it for granted, but I assume if you look at these, yeah, you can see they've got the same sort of thing going on where they're not using black as a stroke. And as I said, the light, traditionally light is rendered, and this is true in fine art paintings, you know, fine art figure artists and portrait artists. In general, we will use the classical lighting as the light source coming from the upper left. So the shadow is lower right. So you can see here, you've got the strongest shadow on the right-hand side and under things. And so that's what you see there. But you can see there's no pitch black being used as a stroke anywhere in those sprites. And around the head, where it's the lightest, they use like the medium color, not even the darkest version of those colors, color families that it is outlining. So let's see, I hope that made sense. So that's it. That's my feedback. Otherwise, the proportions were in general they were fine. The position was fine. I did slightly change the position of the hand. You can see here that the artist originally made the elbow come out and then the arm go back in and then the fist go back out again. But at that resolution, it doesn't read that well, and it just makes it look like the gaunt is shaped slightly odd. And the pose, especially for male figures, the pose looks a little more heroic if the arms are a little bit more spread out down by the side there. So that's it. You can see here's the before and after. Well, actually, let's go this way. So there's the before, and here's the after. Let me see if I can... unfortunately, I don't think I can line them up perfectly, so there's always going to be some amount of shift. But, oh, well, if I do it this way, maybe. Close enough. You get the idea. But so, yep, so before, after, and just get that character back up here. And keep in mind, sometimes even if you're given a very specific character design sheet here, that's the design for the character, and that's perhaps even the style of art to be used for the high resolution portraits of the character, even in the game, or for cinematic scenes. But for the more chibi style in-game sprites, you probably want to keep to those very established style conventions. So no nose, no mouth, and then really catch that shininess of hair with that very recognizable traditional JRPG halo head highlight style there on the hair. But that's it. I hope that all made sense. I hope it was helpful. I can't think of anything else. I think I covered all the points I wanted to. Yeah, so that's it. I will stop rambling now, and thanks everyone for watching.